Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today on one issue, and I promise, out of deference to my friend who is the presiding officer right now, not to bring up anything about college football this past weekend. That will be for another discussion. But I rise today, Mr. President, to urge my colleagues to take an important step to correct one of the great injustices in America, an injustice that many in this body may not have a full appreciation for because it just might not affect too many of your particular constituents. I'm speaking of the injustices faced by real property owners known as heirs property owners. These landowners, who are typically African American farmers and producers in the Deep South, own land that has been informally passed down within families, often for several generations, without any clear title. Sadly, that has often led to costly legal complications. It's prevented landowners from qualifying for federal assistance, and in many cases, resulted in actual loss of land ownership. This issue overwhelmingly impacts African American land ownership, of which an estimated 60% is heirs property, and created barriers to building generational wealth. It's no coincidence, Mr. President, that this has impacted black landowners when you consider the challenges faced by previous generations of African Americans that they had to face the obstacles in purchasing land, just to purchase their land, the obstacles that they faced, to obtain legal services, and to have their wills prepared. The heirs property challenges facing these families today is yet another vestige of the Jim Crow era that, with some exceptions, has lasted far too long and that we must seek to correct. These injustices have had long-lasting consequences for the families who have struggled to prove their claims, including the untold emotional cost for those who have seen their family land taken or sold out from under them. Because a significant portion of minority-owned rural land was passed down through generations as heirs property, these farmers and ranchers have been unable to obtain farm numbers and thus access to a multitude of USDA programs. Those programs are vital to these landowners who already face significant risk and uncertainty in their work. That's why when I came to the Senate last year, I teamed up with my friend from South Carolina, Senator Scott, to work together to initiate changes that will start to help these farmers gain access to federal aid and help us better understand the full spectrum of challenges they face as a result of their heirs property status. I'm really proud of the fact that we secured several provisions in the final 2018 Farm Bill that addressing heirs property. And I want to thank Senators Roberts and Stabenow for their assistance. One of the biggest components that was included will allow heirs property owners with the appropriate documentation to obtain USDA farm numbers so that they can gain access to the department's programs like crop insurance and disaster relief. However, that is just one of the obstacles they face today. Another provision focuses on consolidating land ownership. Heirs often faced with issues of, quote, fractional ownership among relatives. Their own family had the fractional shares of the land that has been passed down for generations, and that increases the chances of one heir partitioning the land or causing the land to be lost due to a tax default. Some states even require the entire property to be sold if the courts find that dividing the land would prejudice one owner. Under these circumstances, it is no wonder that between 1910 and 1997, an estimated 90% of land owned by African Americans in this country was lost due to heirs property issues. Mr. President, that statistic bears repeating and emphasizing. Between 1910 and 1997, an estimated 90% of land owned by African Americans in the United States was lost due to heirs' property issues. But last year, together we embarked on the journey to right these wrongs. The 2018 Farm Bill gave authority to the USDA Secretary to make loans to eligible entities like cooperatives and credit unions that have experience helping minority farmers so that they can relend funds to assist heirs with undivided interest to resolve ownership and succession on farmland. My amendment that we will be voting on shortly will provide $5 million to help get this program off the ground. That is the same amount of money that is included in the House version of the appropriations bill. This is an important next step to fulfill the intent of last year's Farm Bill and to help these families maintain land that is rightfully theirs. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this amendment and continuing our efforts together to remove these barriers and right these wrongs. Mr. President, I'd like to call up Amendment number 1067 as provided for under the previous order, and I ask that it be reported by number.
Without objection, the clerk will report the amendment by number.
Senator from Alabama, Mr. Jones, proposes an amendment number 1067 to amendment number 948.
I do. Thank you. I feel. Thank you.